Ang ingay nyo!
Living in a subdivision or village has its pros and cons. However, there are some instances where the cons outweigh the pros, especially when your neighbors are causing homeowners like you grief and frustration and have become a nuisance to your everyday life. Such instances include singing with their videoke machine at the late hours of the night or a pet dog barking all night. Other instances can be parking their cars in front of your property or throwing their trash in your garbage cans. What acts are considered as nuisances? What are the laws that protect homeowners from the acts of nuisance neighbors? What legal remedies can homeowners do in extreme cases of nuisance acts? Good evening. You are watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News channel. This show is about making the law work for you by giving legal advice on topics that matter to you. I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno.
And I'm Attorney Nepomuceno. Tonight, we will discuss your legal rights on the issue of nuisance neighbors. What you need to know and do when you have a neighbor who's making life difficult for you by committing acts that are considered a nuisance under the law.
Our guest for tonight is Attorney Jonathan Sarte, professor at the FEU Institute of Law and CEU School of Law and Jurisprudence. Good evening, Attorney Sarte. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Karen.
Good evening,
Thank you also.
Jonathan.
Good evening, Rod.
He's my co-faculty sa CEU.
All right, there you go. You're not causing them a nuisance to each other.
No, kasi we don't teach on the same day.
Well, as they say, you should love your neighbor, but sometimes your neighbor is very hard to love,
Yes.
diba?
Oo
Especially
nga.
if they're a nuisance. So maybe we can
Clarify
what the
a lot
nuisance
of
is.
people don't even know this term. But then when you tell them, ano ba yung nuisance? They're
Yeah.
like, yan pala yun. That always happens
Yeah,
to
because
me.
a lot of times it's subjective, eh. But what people don't know is that this is a legal term. I mean, this nuisance, it's an actual legal term.
In
and we can
Tagalog, siguro,
define it.
layman's term, perwisyo. Nuisance,
Yeah.
perwisyo, yeah. So, I guess we can give guidelines. What is a
Yeah.
nuisance?
Well, yeah, it's true that nuisance, there is an ordinary word, nuisance, that we all know it means something that annoys or pesters, or in Tagalog, yung nakakainis. Ano? But
Yeah.
there is really a legal concept called nuisance in the Civil Code, which is of American origin. It's something that offends the senses, or endangers health or safety, or impedes or obstructs highways or streets. These are called nuisance.
Now, is this an act or an omission? Is it or is it a condition of your building?
It's an act, it's a condition, even a business can be a nuisance.
Yeah,
Okay.
maybe we can give talagang concrete examples.
yeah.
Like very obvious nuisance, which is a nuisance per se, meaning indisputable na nuisance talaga siya. Like a factory that gives out
chemicals
or
waste,
toxic substances. That's a nuisance because it's a hazard to the health of everyone close to that factory, right?
Yes, yes.
What other examples can you give?
Yung mga talagang nuisance per se.
Well, there is an old ruling that said a house of ill repute is actually
Mga
mga prostitution house.
Pag
because
mga
it offends
mga
decency
nightclub.
and morality.
But there's a street in Makati na punong-puno nitong mga
What is that-
nightclubs.
What is that
At
street
saka-
again? I don't know that street.
Ayaw. Pwede ba natin
I was
bigay
gonna
yung pangalan?
I was gonna name the street, but
Oo nga,
baka-
it's close to Rockwell, that area, close to Makati Avenue. Basta,
Right,
meron doon. So is that, paano yung mga, but it is close to residential areas and apartments. Is that considered a nuisance?
It could be. We all know what Mayor Lim did to, the red light district in Manila. He closed it down, and
Was that on the basis of nuisance, though, or a
yes,
basis-
there
It
is.
was.
There is.
Yun
Yeah,
yung,
it's
that's
based
the
on
law they
nuisance.
used
Yes.
para masara.
Now, so there are provisions. There's specific laws. Are there provisions in the civil code specifying talaga on?
What remedies? So,
what remedies,
kunwari,
oo.
if I have a neighbor who collects trash dahil hindi niya inaayos, tapos talagang kumakalat siya sa kalye, sa side ko, what can I do in those cases? So, this is a nuisance. What remedies do I have under the law?
Well, under the Civil Code, there are two kinds of nuisances generally, a public and a private nuisance. The public nuisance would affect a whole community or a neighborhood. So in your question, Karen, if the garbage affects a whole community.
Meaning,
Then-
kunwari,
Yeah.
umaapaw yung basura niya sa public street so that
Yeah.
every neighbor or any person who drives by or walks through the street encounters his trash. That's a public nuisance.
Right.
What can they do against this
Yeah.
type of person?
Well, if it's a public nuisance, you can file a criminal case. But since these are residents of the same community, then the first course of remedy would be to go to the barangay.
To go to
yes.
which reminds me, sa Twitter,
Yeah.
someone that told me, nag-send siya sa Twitter na, Mr. Nat Balanza, alam ko pwede ipabarangay ginawa na ng nanay ko yun. So, pwede ba talaga sila lumapit sa barangay first?
Yes. Under the law, they should go to the barangay first because there is a law that says the primary jurisdiction should be the barangay.
Yeah. But the law does
Especially-
provide also when it comes to public nuisances. Yeah, the requirement of a public health officer.
Yes, yes.
All right,
They
so-
can also go to the city health officer.
City
or
health
the
officer,
municipal
yeah.
health officer.
So and police.
Well, yes, because it's a criminal offense. But the first stop should be, if it's something that offends the health or the senses, then it should be the health officer. If it's a dangerous building or something that needs to be demolished, then they should go to the building official.
But just to clarify, you mentioned earlier, if it's public or private nuisance,
Yes,
diba?
yes.
So public, it's potentially also a criminal case.
criminal case, yes.
Criminal case, civil case, and also, what is this rule on abatement? Yung parang yung on your own, you can abate or stop or lessen
So kung-
the thing that's causing you nuisance.
There is such a thing called extrajudicial abatement of a public nuisance. But first of all, the nuisance should be what we call a nuisance per se, which is it's really a nuisance anywhere.
No
anywhere
matter how you
it's-
look at it.
Yes,
Yeah.
in any location, in any situation, it's a nuisance.
Meaning, kunwari, toxic substances,
Yes.
basura.
Yes.
Pero pagka kunwari noise, iba-iba kasi yung
Yeah.
opinion ng mga tao. They
Yeah.
can say, it's not really
Yeah.
noisy. Kunwari, may party sa kabila lagi.
Sometimes subjective,
Oo,
no?
they can say, it's not really a nuisance. So,
We actually received a lot of messages regarding that
So if there's a
specifically.
difference in opinion, that's really not a nuisance per
Yeah,
se.
a certain noise can be a nuisance in a certain situation, and in another situation, it won't be a nuisance, in which case it's not a nuisance per se. It's what we call a nuisance per accidents.
Oo. So that, ang remedy against that would
It cannot be abated without court intervention.
Oh, you have to file a case in
Yes.
court.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
And just to clarify to the viewers, the criminal case only applies pag public nuisance, meaning it affects a whole community.
whole community.
So
Kung
kung
ikaw lang,
kunwari, dalawang bahay lang kayo, tapos yung
Yeah.
neighbor mo sobrang ingay, then you
You
can't
file a criminal case. But a civil case you can, right?
Yeah.
Civil case. All right.
Okay, let's start answering questions
Questions,
from our viewers. First, our first question is from Ida, and she asks us, we have a neighbor who always invites his friends over to their house to drink, most of the time. They drink outside of his house and they are loud and crass. My other neighbors want this to stop. However, the man has a history of reacting violently when approached of this issue. How should we handle this? Okay.
All right.
Well,
Unang-una, is that a nuisance? Kung lagi ka nag-i-invite, tapos nang
Regular,
inuman.
I guess it seems regularly. no?
Yes.
It's, it's a regular thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
I would say it's a nuisance because of the regularity. The test, of course, is reasonableness. We have to find out the time that the noise is being made. If it's in the wee hours,
Yeah.
of course, it's a nuisance.
Wee hours,
And-
like madaling araw.
Right.
What about daytime? Isn't that also?
Daytime, it depends because a person also has a right to enjoy,
His
his own
property.
property.
In that case, it's more of a private nuisance, right?
It's a private
Because
nuisance.
it doesn't bother the whole community.
If it affects only like
unless he sings
a few houses. Yeah.
So in this case,
If it's
for
a-
Ida, since it appears that it affects her and some neighbors, this is a private nuisance. So one thing we can eliminate is that they cannot file a criminal case against this neighbor.
They cannot
right?
file a criminal case, but they can always go to the barangay. The barangay can ask that person to stop because, according to the caller, the person has a violent tendency. So
So
He
to
can go to-
protect herself na rin.
yeah,
Yeah. Or maybe magpa-invite na lang siya. Magpa-invite na lang siya to the party para.
Oo. Speaking of noise, sorry, I just have to add this.
Okay.
Kasi ang dami nagtanong sa Twitter.
Yeah.
Mr. VJ Fau, how about neighbors who sing on their videoke at wee hours of the morning? And J.R. Kanda, paano po yung may ingay na nagvi-video okay na kapitbahay? And Nono Pogi rin, yun yung sabi niya.
Si Nono Pogi, yeah.
Video okay.
Video okay lang,
Oo.
yun ang normal problem.
Yeah, it's the same. That's very common nowadays, the video okay. Well, it could really result in a very loud, a disturbing noise, especially.
Yeah.
Most of these parties are held at night.
Right.
Yeah. So what can they do? Can they
can still
first
go.
go to the barangay?
Yes.
But-
The barangay. Eventually, they can file a case in the courts. a
But they
civil case.
can't go, this is what you call they cannot do it extrajudicially, meaning they cannot just go to that house and grab the video, confiscate the
No,
video
no,
okay machine.
They cannot. They cannot do that. No. In the first place, you have to demand, diba? For you to be able to go for the remedy of abatement,
Yes.
which is to lessen or to remove the thing that's causing you nuisance. You have to give out a demand, diba?
Kailangan ba written?
Yeah,
Or
kailangan ba
can
written
you-
yun?
No, it doesn't have to be written.
So you can just go over to the neighbor and say, please stop
Yeah,
or
but
lower the volume.
but the singing is not really a nuisance per se. So eventually, it has to really be determined by the court
parang
if it's a
pakiusap lang,
nuisance.
no? All right, our next question naman is from Juancho, and he asks, a neighbor has 3 dogs. I'm a dog lover pa naman. That are roaming freely in our neighborhood because they keep leaving their gates open. Thankfully, the dogs have not bitten anyone yet. However, they keep going through our trash and make a mess. We've already addressed this issue to our neighbor and to the barangay. At first, they promised to keep their gates closed at all times, but as time has passed, they left it open again and again, and the dogs are once again free to steal our garbage. Is there another way we can resolve this?
First of all, the dogs could pose a danger to safety because we don't know what kind of dogs these are. If these are those that don't bite, they haven't
Mga Shih
bitten.
Tzu lang, Chihuahua.
Yeah.
Chihuahua lang, hindi naman
Then
siguro.
we-
Mga Yorkie.
We talk about what they do to the garbage. Okay, they scatter the trash all over, and that would offend the senses, like the smell
Yeah.
or sight.
Or cause annoyance.
Yeah.
That would
So
It
that's
is
a
annoyance. It is
nuisance,
annoyance.
basically.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it is a nuisance, and it can be abated.
Is that private or public nuisance?
It's a private nuisance.
Kasi ikaw lang, no? It's just your trash. So-
Probably it
So-
happened in front of
So
your house.
One
The-
is
the
that
remedy-
first, approach the barangay. Second, this person can file a case, a civil case, to have that neighbor basically, to compel that neighbor to keep the dogs.
Yes, to keep the dogs within the compound.
Okay, that's good. We still have plenty to discuss with Attorney Sarte. Legal Help Desk will return after these reminders. You're still watching Legal Help Desk on the Solar News Channel, and we are still joined by our guest, Attorney Sarte, professor at the FEU Institute of Law and CUU School of Law and Jurisprudence.
Yeah, so we were talking about public and private nuisance.
Yes.
So
And I'd like to pick up on the dogs, kasi
the dogs, yeah.
yes,
Okay.
Menchu Makapagal sent us a tweet saying, how do you classify noisy or dangerous? What if prejudiced ang kapitbahay, ayaw lang sa aso? Yeah, how do you determine that, no? Kung nuisance talaga?
Not all dog noises are nuisances.
Yeah.
Well, of course, the complainer has to prove that he is a person of ordinary sensibilities.
Ordinary,
That
meaning
is the
hindi
test.
unreasonably
Hindi
sensitive.
unreasonable.
So-
Kasi may iba nga naman very
Yeah.
sensitive na konting ingay
Yeah.
lang, na
Konting bark-
apektuhan.
konting bark lang.
So a
Oo.
certain noise would be a nuisance if it bothers a person of ordinary sensibilities. And also, the test always is reasonableness.
Okay. Do they take into account age? Kasi older neighbors tend to be more irritable. So a regular party to them, to other people, might be too noisy for older people who sleep by 9 p.m.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
will the court take that into account?
Yeah, there
Or-
is a provision in the civil code that persons of advanced age will be given special protection,
Okay.
and they will be considered in rendering decisions.
Okay, speaking of animals, another question that was sent to us by Jezreel Menges. I have a neighbor with hundreds of fighting cocks beside his vacant lot inside our subdivision. Is it legal? Siguro yung question niya, can they have that abated?
Hundreds of fighting
Hundreds
cocks.
of fighting cocks. I would imagine this would create a lot of noise,
Yeah.
especially at dawn.
In the morning.
Imagine, no?
Yeah.
Gising ka talaga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Natural alarm clock.
So how
so-
and in especially in the provinces, di ba?
Right. Not to mention the waste.
Ito nga sa subdivision daw nila eh.
Hindi
So,
uncommon yun.
what
So-
can he do?
He can abate the nuisance. He can ask
He
for.
can.
He can.
Okay.
He can complain to the barangay.
Now, abatement kasi means is that you can remove, di ba? You can remove or get rid of the of the cause of it. Can I
Make them into fried
literally
chicken.
make them a fried
Unti-unti
chicken?
mo kinukuha.
Can I remove them and make them fried chicken?
It includes filing an action to abate the nuisance.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
it
minsan may extrajudicial abatement. But let's say I passed through all the the requirements of an extrajudicial abatement. Meaning I gave the demand, they refused, and then I have a district health officer, I had a police. Could I literally get the chicken and the chicken, the fighting cock and get rid of it?
I would think that you would still need the help of the
Yeah.
health
I think that's a rule of thumb, no?
Yeah,
Unless it's a private, kung private nuisance siya, you can't just do it yourself. You really have to wait for the law.
And it's a
the
problem
law
of
enforcers.
how to go about it if there
Yeah.
are several chickens or roosters.
No, let's say I go in the middle of the night and no, literally, some people are probably I saw this in some of the questions. For example, some of them have even said, I know this is kind of crazy, but they'd like to, whatever animal that's causing so much noise, I'd like to shoot it. I mean, of course,
How morbid, no?
I know it's morbid, but some people, those are the sentiments of some people. And is that abatement? Is that a valid abatement?
No, I wouldn't advise that
Yeah,
because
because,
there is also the requirement of reasonable necessity to prevent a disturbance.
So we wanted to clear that.
And also, if you'll go inside and grab those chickens, you could be liable for
So we can
robbery.
advise our
Or
televiewers, at least when it
trespass
comes to extrajudicial abatement, or removing the nuisance, you have to be very careful. You just don't go ahead and certainly seek the advice of a lawyer whether it.
I
it
have
will pass.
another interesting question from Twitter. We have a tenant, and he raised to our attention that I guess this is a neighbor of theirs that are making loud sexual noises every night. The kids can hear it. They can't complain directly because they are not unit owners. They are just renting from us. But basically, I guess that's their question. Is that a nuisance? So he said that the condo is only 42 square meters and tabi-tabi.
These are tenants.
Yes, his tenants.
I think I would say he has a right to complain because
Who has a right to complain? If
the
you're
tenant.
just renting, can you still complain about the nuisance?
Yes, the general definition of a nuisance is it is an unlawful interference on the enjoyment of property. So if you're a tenant, of course you have to enjoy the property that you're renting, and if there is disturbing noise
Yes, and he
in
has,
the other unit,
apparently the tenant has kids and they always hear this
Yeah.
loud sexual noises from the neighbors.
This
So
loud
is
sexual
that-
noise, is that-
is that a nuisance in the first place?
yes,
Yeah.
it offends decency, it offends
Yeah,
morality.
okay.
Yes.
Because there is
Okay.
such a thing as the doctrine of attractive nuisance. That's not the doctrine of attractive nuisance.
Si Rod, naisip niya agad. Okay, so at least for this
Yeah.
question, the answer is yes, they can complain
Yes.
about this. And
Yeah.
then they can first go to the barangay.
Yes.
And then kung hindi
Yeah.
maayos, then they can file a
Right.
case, civil case, to abate the nuisance, meaning to stop this
To stop
nuisance.
it.
Oo.
No, but seriously though, there is a doctrine of attractive nuisance. Maybe let's clarify that. There's, di ba, when you have certain things in your property which attract children
Kids, yeah.
Yes.
and then
Oo.
pose danger. Can you
Yes.
elaborate on that a bit?
Well, it arose from a situation where there's a swimming pool, for example, or an excavation that has water, and children naturally they want, they like water, they want to swim. But there has been a ruling by the Supreme Court that a swimming pool in itself, is not an attractive
Yeah.
nuisance, not unless.
I think,
the owner-
kasi I read about that Supreme Court case. It was a child who drowned.
Yeah.
Kasi pumunta siya dun sa katabing property dahil nakita niya yung pool
Yeah.
and then fell over.
Yeah,
and
in that
drowned.
case, kasi if you have an attractive nuisance, we'd like to share this. No, if you have an attractive nuisance, for example, a little construction di ba? Na you don't have any blockade or anything and attracts children, you can be liable. You know, the owner of the property is liable. And precisely, it's the doctrine of attractive nuisance. If you don't prevent the children who are your neighbor's kids, you don't prevent them from coming in, you might be subject to liability. So you have to be careful about that. So it's
Make sure that you fence
you fence out. You fence out anything. All right. Okay. I guess we have some
another
questions.
question. Yes, we have a question from Sherwin, and he asks, "My neighbor has a mango tree in his yard, but some of the branches have reached our side of the fence. Sometimes I see them climbing to our roof to get the fruits from these branches. I've already talked to my neighbor about this and have expressed my concern for the security of my house and family should ever a burglar will use my neighbor's tree to their advantage. I have offered to trim down the branches that are touching our side, but my neighbor got furious and threatened to sue me if I ever touched even one leaf of his tree.
Wow.
Who is at the right here?" Okay.
Wow.
So may halong neighbor dispute.
Tsaka,
Parang na-imagine ko in my head, pag hinawakan mo yung kahit isang dahon sa puno ko,
Yeah.
I will,
That's Fernando
kita.
po.
Oo. But, so yeah,
No,
so in the first
but
place, is
that's-
that a nuisance? A tree overreaching to a neighbor's property?
parang overlapping with property rights to, di ba? Property.
I wouldn't say it's a nuisance because it's a normal occurrence. First of all, the tree is technically the belonging of the owner of the land.
Where the
That's
tree
his
is growing from.
yes.
No?
Now, the branches that grow, encroach on the next property, the owner of the next property can ask the owner to cut the branches off. But if he refuses, then he can always go to court.
But this is
So
not on
that's
the basis.
yeah,
not on the basis of
yes,
nuisance.
your
no?
remedy is based on property law,
Yes,
not based
it's-
on your remedy as a nuisance. Because in this case, it's not even a nuisance.
It's not a nuisance. It's actually the easement. It's the
A
easement.
question on easement, whether that tree has an easement.
Right.
In fact, it might even be beneficial because when the fruits fall on his land, those
That's
are
his.
those are
Yeah.
his fruits
but,
already.
But what if
Yeah.
maybe the nuisance here would be the fact of him climbing the tree to grab the fruits? Is that a nuisance?
If someone climbs the tree and he gets into the property, then that would be a violation because the owner owns, the
That's,
airspace,
the
airspace.
airspace
on top
up to a
there,
reasonable
okay.
extent.
Okay.
The airspace on
So I guess to that
above him.
viewer, it's not a nuisance, but your remedy is still based on the law. Pero iba lang, it's not part of the law on nuisance. It's basically your property rights.
Another sense naman, I'm sorry, I have to ask this. No? Kanina we're talking about videokes and karaokes and all that. How about pungent smell? For example, if you're, my neighbor used to be from another country. I won't mention what, kasi, or what region, kasi baka I'll be, someone will say I'm a racist. But it was clearly very,
Too strong.
too strong, and we couldn't sleep, we couldn't concentrate, and
We
I
have a
think,
neighbor
yeah.
like that. Sa hallway, pag labas mo palang elevator, my husband was saying, our neighbor is cooking curry as if it were going out of style. Because really, talagang you can smell it. Is that a nuisance? Kung
Yeah.
buti pa nga curry, mabango-bango eh. But what
Yeah,
if
but if it's-
people who don't like the smell of tuyo or malansa, is that a nuisance smell?
Again, it's a question of whether the person of ordinary sensibilities will be annoyed. It's a nuisance if it offends one of the senses. The sense of smell is included. So if it's
I guess
really
food in
pungent,
food in itself probably not, no? I mean, like cooking,
food in itself.
It's,
no.
it's not, yeah. It's the smell of food.
Oo.
no?
And by
But
the
if it's-
time you get a remedy for a nuisance, does it have to always occur? Parang when you say neighbors that have noisy karaoke or videoke, paano kung once or twice lang? In order for your case to be strong when you file it, gaano kadalas dapat?
It has to be, to a certain extent recurrent or habitual.
Regular, no?
Yeah,
I see.
regular.
Okay. All right. Mark is asking us, our neighbor is renovating their house. Common to. And sometimes the construction goes on until past 6. Can we demand for them to stop at a more reasonable hour?
Yes, there are cases that nuisance has reference to time. So, like for example, construction, these are legitimate activities. They're not nuisance per se, but when they're done, past the reasonable hour, then they can be nuisances. Like during those times, people may be resting or.
Sabagay,
Yeah,
if
oo.
you have a 10 p.m. Loud construction noises, then That's really a nuisance, di ba? Imagine drilling sounds, di ba?
I know in condominiums they have regulations. They restrict construction works between reasonable hours.
What if, last question, parent Supreme Court case before, I think, pagka, naman, may malapit na airport sa'yo. So you keep hearing the sounds of airplanes going by your house. Can you ask the government, this is a public nuisance, or can you ask them to at least move the airport away from the residential area?
Yeah, there was a case in the U.S. The ruling there was there is what you call reasonable requirements of aerial navigation, and the person cannot really complain because he was the one who chose that. Yeah, who picked that site beside the airport.
So in the Philippines, is that applicable? Can you complain? There are a lot of subdivisions na malapit sa mga airports.
Yeah, U.S. cases are applicable by persuasion, in a persuasive effect.
No, yung mga generators, there was a case also here locally. There was, diba, where I think it involved Meralco, where they had a power generating turbine or whatever, and it was, they measured the amount of the decibels, and they said that 70 decibels is too much. So I guess if it's a recurrent thing, and let's say my neighbor has a generator, for example, and it's causing that, I can, diba?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can.
You can complain
in that
about
situation. Yes.
Even if per se a generator is not really a nuisance, it's
Yes, it is.
as long as it's causing. All right. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. I still have a lot of questions, a ton of questions, but unfortunately, that's all the time we have. We'd like to thank our guest, Attorney Jonathan Sarte, Professor at the FEU Institute of Law and CU School of Law and Jurisprudence, for being with us tonight. I'm Attorney Rod Nepomuceno.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Join us again next Monday as we discuss the Sharia law. Good night.